Right. There are a lot of studies about how the more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to be bullied. Um, I'm going to stop here for a moment and show off my nice dandy duds. This, prison issue. These pants, prison issue. These shoes, prison issue. All right, so I suppose I'm going to need to grab some of the stuff from different sites to put over in the chat on the side. I always try to set it up so that it'll play the live chat. For some odd reason, it hasn't been allowing me to do that recently. Um, when I was 6 years old, I went to a place called Centennial Peaks Mental Hospital in Boulder, Colorado, or in Boulder County, Colorado. My first day there, um, I read the word schizophrenic upside down across the desk. This is the first time I'd seen my mom in probably 6 months. They took her out of the rehab facility that she was in so that she could sign my rights away to the state of Colorado. After that, they put a lot of drugs into me. And they kept those drugs in me until I turned 17. I ran into two doctors who worked together to try to figure out what was going on, Angie Robb and Dr. Matthews, I believe. And it was their professional opinion that it was the drugs that were giving me the issues. When we got me off the government medications, my issues stopped. When I was telling one of my therapists about that, she said they diagnosed you as schizophrenic on the first day. They can't do that. I was like, no, they didn't diagnose me as schizophrenic. It's that he had somebody else's file on the desk when we arrived. So it was somebody else's file. Reason that's important. One of them is because the police kept on telling people that I was schizophrenic at the hospitals when I'd try to turn the police in. And you can't diagnose somebody as schizophrenic if you're an officer. Also, the people at the hospital cannot diagnose you as schizophrenic without 6 months worth of at least two recurring behaviors that are known to be schizophrenic. Like, for example, I don't think that I'm Jesus. I don't think that I'm Satan. I don't think that I'm the Archangel Gabriel or the Archangel Michael. A lot of y'all who know schizophrenic people, these are some pretty common ones. Um, One of the things that has been used to prevent me from having my court dates and to ignore my intelligence as well as my education and my first-hand knowledge is the mentally ill thing. If you call somebody mentally ill, it's just assumed that they're schizophrenic. When you look at the laws, how the laws are set up for mentally ill, you look at all these different things that are considered mentally ill, and then you look at the laws that they make to blanket all of us. All of us are to be treated as if we are violent schizophrenics. The police are automatically to assume that we are violent schizophrenics if we are called mentally ill. And that makes it so that they don't have to do their job, so that your intelligence does not matter, it does not count. Meanwhile, 40% of those diagnosed with schizophrenia in the United States are not schizophrenic. 40%. That is a massive number. Imagine if 40% of those diagnosed with breast cancer didn't actually have breast cancer. Imagine if 40% of those who are diagnosed with AIDS don't have AIDS. Imagine if 40% of those diagnosed with COVID didn't have COVID. So there's some people who want to show their ignorance quite a bit. I want to explain to you that I have an IQ of 172. I actually had to take my IQ test twice because when I came out with 172 on my first IQ test at Centennial Peaks, they went, "There's no way. We got to test this kid again." The second time I only got a 132. What was the difference between the first time and the second time? The first time I took an IQ test, I'd only been there a couple of days and I wasn't all drugged up. I'd gotten at least a little bit of sleep. The second time I took it, I had to take a EEG. If any of you guys know what that is, it's a brain scan. Before you take an EEG, they don't let you sleep. You're not allowed to sleep because when you go in to take the EEG, they want you to sleep through it. So I took my EEG. That was about an hour, hour and a half worth of sleep, I suppose. I'm guessing, obviously. I was only 6 years old, and it was a long, long time ago. Now, after I woke up from that, that's when I took the second IQ test, and I only got a 132, and I was all sorts of bummed about it. And I remember telling the nurses and the doctors, "Hey, that first time I wasn't all drugged up. I did a really good job. I would really appreciate it if we could count that one instead of the 132, even though at that time I didn't realize how intelligent 132 was. It's way up there. Now, with an IQ of 172, what they said was that they were going to average out the two test scores and they were going to write that down. So the average between 172 and 132. You just add 172 and 132 and you divide it by 2. Not very difficult. Well, they didn't do that. But the thing here is that it's an extremely high intelligence. I was told that I was in the 99th percentile. What that means is if there's 100 people in a room, I'm smarter than 99 of them. Of course, I'm also in the room, so I'm the most intelligent one. One of my therapists explained it to me that, well, if there was a room full of people that were 99th percentile, you would still be the 99th percentile. That means if you took the smartest people in 100 rooms with 100 people in each one of them, if you took the smartest person in each room and you put them all in a room, I'd be the most intelligent still. That's out of, obviously, if there's 100 rooms, that's 10,000 people. So she was telling me basically that if there's 10,000 people, I'm the most intelligent person out of 10,000. Well, according to the statistics, it's quite a bit different. Matter of fact, it's over 25 times higher than that. Sorry, 29 times that. See, it's not 1 in 10,000, it's 1 in 294,048. To put that in perspective, if you took every single town and city in America, there would be one person with my intelligence level for every 70 towns and cities in America. Just one. That's how rare it is. I suppose we should start connecting things here. Intelligence and bullying. There's also intelligence and depression. Intelligent people are more likely to be depressed because they're more likely to know what the hell's going on. Let's see, this one looks good. I haven't listened to it or read it, but I'm going to attach it anyway, just because I like the name of it. It says Adult Bullying, the Epidemic No One Talks About. So we'll go ahead and put that up there just because, well, I might want to go back and listen to it at some point. Let's see. A lot of these are how to stop somebody from bullying you, and then here's the CIA anti-bullying. But that's weird. Um, Bullying and harassment training. It's looked like I'm not finding the one that I'm looking for. Um, we got a lot of people who they watch too much Hollyweird, and they think that violence is okay. They think that the vigilantism that they see on TV is okay. In real life, it's against the law. If you watch NCIS, they do a lot of things that are against the law. You watch Law and Order SVU, they break the law on every single episode. The officers do. Sorry, there's a train going by. A lot of the problem with this whole Hollyweird thing is that people get a false sense of reality and artificial notion of what's really going on. Your understanding of the real world versus Hollywood is, well, they're miles apart. But those of you who don't have to live it and haven't had to live it are going to assume that Law and Order is more than just entertainment. In reality, most of the things that they do on Law and Order and Law and Order SVU is illegal, but they get away with it in that show. Well, they get away with it in real life too. In the show, when they have a hunch about somebody, they're usually right, and it's okay to the American public watching this show that, these officers broke the law in the show because they caught the bad guy. In reality, they're often wrong, and after realizing that they're wrong, they will often commit a lot more felonies than they did when they were trying to frame that person up, which is what it becomes. If an officer is having to break the law to try to arrest somebody, they're trying to frame them. That is literally what it is. Now, my intelligence does make me or put me at an increased risk of being bullied. A lot of that is because stupid people have too much pride. It is okay to not be as intelligent as me, just like it is okay for me not to be as good looking as you are. We're all different. My intelligence does not make me a bad person any more than your looks make you a bad person. But then again, people are always weary of somebody who's intelligent. Many of the women that I know got the same exact piece of advice from their mother. And this piece of advice is don't date a man who's smarter than you because you want to win the arguments. That's stupid. An intelligent man can win the arguments because he's intelligent, because he's arguing by using reason. He's not trying to argue, he's trying to educate. So your mother is telling you not to get educated. Your mother is telling you to pick a man that you can easily control. Now, a lot of the stuff that I've been going through is due to sexism and racism, the assumption of special treatment. In reality, homeless people, regardless of color, are killed at a much higher rate than black people are, but we're ignoring the homeless and going to try to fight for black rights. Now, I am not against fighting for black rights. Matter of fact, I do fight for black rights. I speak out every single day. I speak out for women's rights too, but I'm also going to speak up for men's rights, even if those men happen to be white. If you are white and homeless, you still have less rights than a black man in a house. If you are white and homeless, you still have a much higher chance of getting killed by the police than a black man in a house. To put this in perspective, there are about 60 million black people in America in 2019 and about 500,000 homeless people in 2019. That means that the homeless account for 1/120th of the black population. there's about 60 million disabled people in America at that time too, so they have about an equal uh, population size to African Americans. Now, 22% of those killed by police in 2019 were black. 51% of those killed by police in 2019 were disabled. That means that you've got over double the chance of getting killed by police as a disabled person than you do as a black person. But then let's take a look at the homeless. 51% of those killed in 2019, 51% of those killed by police, or sorry, 49% of those killed by police in 2019 um, were homeless. 49%. They only account for 1/120th the population size of the disabled or black folks, but they account for over double the number of people killed as compared to black folks. Now, if we put this in perspective by, let's say that the homeless population was equal to the black population or the disabled population, and the police killed them at the same rate per capita that they're doing now, there would be over 48,000 homeless people killed per year by police. Now, when we talk about compounded chances, let me explain that to you. Your chances of a homeless person are not 1 in 1,100 of being killed by the police every year, or 1 in 100 of your chances of being killed by police. It's, oh, sorry, my mouth isn't working right. Your chances are not 1 in 1,100 of being killed by the police. Your chances are 1 in 1,100 of being killed by the police every single year, which means that next year we start the counter over again. You have a 1 in 1,100 chance of being killed by police, whereas, well, if you're black, you have a far less chance of being killed by police. Far less. Now, that doesn't mean that black people aren't being treated horribly. And when I say that the homeless people are victimized at a much higher rate, a lot of people assume that I'm saying that it's okay to do those things to black people. I'm not saying it's okay to do those things to black people. I'm saying it's not okay to do it to anybody, and it's not okay to make any of the victims feel like they're not victims or like they wanted it, needed it, chose it, and deserved it. Especially when you want to throw it in their face. Well, you get white privilege. Not if you're fucking homeless, you don't. But people got their own narrative in their head and they're not willing to look before they leap. They want to stone you in the street without trial. That's what I've been having to deal with. Now, obviously, that's a metaphor. People aren't literally trying to stone me in the streets, although people have thrown things at me. I've had beer bottles bounce off of my head. I've had beer bottles shatter on the ground next to me. I've had full beer cans smack the ground in front of me and go all over me because people thought, well, there was this rumor about this guy and I seen him on TV, so it must be okay to do these things to him. Nobody's going to stop me because nobody cares. And a lot of people, they don't understand that when you talk about something conceptually, that's completely different than taking an active role. Conceptually, you see a short, fat kid walking down the street and you see him beaten up by 6 kids. Conceptually, there's all sorts of pretty things you can tell him. You can tell him, oh, you just need to love yourself, or you just need to let it go, or so on and so forth. But you know what? You see him the next day, same thing. The day after that, same thing. He takes a different route. They follow him down that different route. Conceptually, you got pretty words to give him. A bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. You just got to love yourself. You just got to let it go. How do you let it go when it's still happening? See, that's conceptual. Now, doing something about it would mean you see them kids beating on that short, fat kid. You go outside and you scare the living hell out of them. You go out and you let them know that if you see them doing that one more time, the police are going to be involved. Now, with me, obviously, they're not going to listen, especially in this town where they've been breaking the law for, well, we can go all the way back to Jim Haith, who helped cover up several murders. That was our sheriff back in 1995 and 96, I believe. And then we had Jeff Ortiz. He went by Taco. He used to ride around in the patrol cruiser drunk off his ass. He actually drank beer in the police vehicle and had somebody else drive him everywhere. One of his deputies did almost all the driving. Scott DeCosta's pretty bad too. Now, so far as I know, he hasn't helped to cover up any murders like Jim Haith did. He's only tried to cover up the fact that Dual County Sheriff's Department was informed on multiple occasions of the situation between myself and Natalie and my stalkers, and they did absolutely nothing. So instead of actually doing something about it, like he said he was going to, he did everything that he could to cover up the crimes by those officers and then allowed them to flee state to avoid prosecution. So they are now police officers in other states where they are going to get away with doing these things. For example, Cody Selhorst is now in Rapid City, South Dakota. Now, hopefully, pending charges, the FBI will go pick him up and bring him to the state of Colorado or the state of Nebraska for prosecution to stand trial for the things that he's done. Now, there's some people who were typing some stuff at me, and I'm going to read it. Some of these folks are, well, pretty ignorant. Let me scroll down. There's one here with Sammy Leon Lawrence IV. And I'm going to go to this video. And I'm going to click on. This is the situation with Sammy Leon Lawrence IV. Now, if you notice, he's dressed like many of the homeless people in Boulder, Colorado. Matter of fact, there's a man named James who has a little grabber just like Zaid and has a little bucket just like Zaid. And, well, he doesn't look like the clean-cut kind of person that would be at those apartments. He looks like a street hippie. Of course, he goes to school at Naropa University, and Naropa is known as the Hippie College. That's what they call it in Boulder, the Hippie College, or Patchouli University. The whole thing behind patchouli is that patchouli is extremely overpowering. A lot of people have told me, people who don't know what patchouli smells like, tell me, well, I heard patchouli smells like pot. No, it doesn't. It doesn't smell a thing like pot. Patchouli smells like patchouli. It's nasty and it's strong. The only thing I can think of as far as good smelling things that smell worse than patchouli is sandalwood. Sandalwood is gross. It dries out my nostrils, dries out my throat. It's just got it's got a nasty smell to it. Now, this is Denver 7 News. There's a part in it where you get to see an officer with a shotgun. That's the officer who assaulted me. His name is Waylon Lolatai. Now, in this scenario, anybody who goes through the entire thing has soon realized that, well, they were treating this man like a homeless person until somebody at the door was letting them know that Zaid lived there. And that's the point. Within just a couple of minutes of that, if he'd have been an actual homeless person without somebody in a house video recording it, these officers would have been able to sell whatever narrative that they want. They would have beaten him up like they do to homeless people. There's a few witnesses to the way the Boulder Police Department treats homeless people, including the repeated assaults by Boulder Police Department against the homeless. Many of them are dead, however. Mobley died this year. His name was Stephen McMillian. He broke his neck trying to show off at Boulder Creek. Now, there's a lot of people who want to keep on selling the narrative that he was targeted because of the color of his skin. He absolutely wasn't. I'm going to tell you something about Boulder, Colorado. Black people are given preferential treatment in Boulder, Colorado. Boulder, Colorado wants to sell this image of being a liberal college town. They're liberal. And they keep pushing. Have a bunch of homeless people build stuff with their community service, and then you put your name on it. Lovely, right? So these guys here, there's a bunch of cops that all get involved, and of course they're being really nice to them, and they're surrounding them the way that they are because, well, by this point they know that they're being filmed and their options are limited. Once they're being filmed, they don't act anywhere near the same way that they act when it's a homeless person. Let's see, we're 19 minutes into the video. I'm trying to find the part with the shotgun. Now, most of these officers I know. Some of them I don't know by name, but most of these officers I know have interacted with personally. People are commenting. I'm sorry, I was reading, so I wasn't on the live streaming thing. I didn't mean to ignore you. Ashley B typed, happiness and intelligent people is the rarest thing I know. Ernest Hemingway. I should really show you guys all of the stuff from Andy Singer's son, Brian. He made a collection of sayings from everyone from Desmond Tutu to Shaka Zulu to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to Albert Einstein to Leonardo da Vinci to Robert Niemöller, all saying basically the same thing. If you turn a blind eye to the tyrant, you are supporting the tyrant. If you do nothing about evil, you are supporting evil. And that's basically what all of them say, but there's about 20 or 30 different quotes. Rosie E typed agreed. Ashley B typed and good evening, Sean. Good evening, Ashley B. Rosie E typed yes, and also who you can easily manipulate. That is true as well. Rosie retracted a message I didn't get to read. George Costanza typed, hi, hope you are well. I'm not, but I'm doing the best I can. Rosie had another message that was retracted. It says NVM. I believe that stands for never mind. Ashley B wrote, intelligence can be a curse. I find it difficult to find people who want to partake in discourse about topics I'm interested in. That is extremely difficult. When you have a high intelligence, it's kind of like knowing a lot about history. Those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. Those who do know their history are still doomed to repeat it because, well, you can't control everybody. You can tell people, hey, this is the water hole. If you don't fill up your canteen here, we got a 100-mile march ahead of us. If you don't fill up your canteen here, you're going to die of dehydration. Well, if they don't want to fill up their canteen and you're 90 miles into the march and they drop dead, it is not your fault. George Costanza wrote, LOL, Ashley, a wise man knows himself to be a fool. You guys should see what I typed here. A friend of mine, I'm actually going to look it up. Her name is Mandy. She is highly intelligent as well. Here it is. It's a picture of Clint Eastwood. It says, I don't understand your specific kind of stupid, but I do admire your total commitment to it. And I wrote, I am the 99th percentile of intelligence. That means if there are 100 people in a room, I'm likely smarter than 99 of them. My therapist said if there was a room with 100 people in the 99th percentile, I would be the 99th percentile of that room. In order to get 199th percentiles into a room to begin with, you have already sorted out 10,000 people. The reality is, with an IQ of 172, the chances of finding someone with my intelligence isn't even 1 in 10,000. It is 1 in 219,569. Out of every 70 cities and townships in America, there is an average of only one person with my IQ. This said, I'm not immune to stupidity, and when I go in, I go all in. So that whole thing about a wise man knows himself to be a fool. Yes, I do. Rosie typed, I strongly agree. People would just say he was targeted because he is black, even if that dude is not innocent. Ashley B typed at George Costanza, ain't that the truth? Oh, that's my phone telling, one of my phones telling me it's going to die. These are full of evidence. None of them work anymore. They're not connected, of course. Two of them, I was locked up too long, and my number was given out while I was locked up. So they're no longer valid as phones, but they are valid as far as being full of evidence. I want to say, obviously, for the record, because this is a live channel, he was targeted because they assumed he was homeless. I'm not saying that he wasn't targeted, because he absolutely was. What I'm saying is that he was not targeted for the color of his skin. I have seen how police interact with black males in Boulder, Colorado, who are drunk off their asses, who are starting trouble and trying to start fights on Pearl Street, and they're wearing a CU jersey. If they think that you're going to college, they will literally look the other way while you commit a crime if you're black in Boulder, Colorado. I've seen this with my own two eyes. A lot of people want to type their ignorance of these situations, where they just assumed because that's the narrative that BLM sold them. Zaid Atkinson is a victim of Boulder police brutality, but he didn't have to deal with the actual brutality of it. A lot of homeless people I know have been beaten down by the police, a lot. When Zaid Atkinson got his help, thank goodness BLM helped him out, because if they hadn't, he would have gotten the same treatment that Samuel Leon Lawrence IV got. What's the difference between those two black men? See, here's the thing. The officer who assaulted me, his name was Waylon Molotai. He's also the one with the shotgun in the video about Zaid Atkinson. He is also the one who assaulted Samuel Leon Lawrence IV. Here's the video, the body camera of Samuel Leon Lawrence, or the body camera footage for Zaid Atkinson. They were able to get that body camera evidence because people were helping, people cared, people did make a big deal out of it. When my rights were violated, even worse, I was told that I deserve it because I'm white. I told that I'm getting special treatment because I'm white. I'm basically told that it's okay to do these things to me because of the color of my skin. And then I'm told that I'm the racist. I'm the racist for speaking up about police brutality, which is the actual issue. Not police brutality towards black people exclusively. That's racist. Not police brutality towards Hispanic people. That's racist. Not police brutality towards any specific group. Any police brutality is wrong. It's kind of like with many of these women's groups. You know, when a man needs help, when there's a woman who comes into these groups and says, hey, I was raped and molested and I need help, there's all sorts of people who want to help them and offer them help and give them all sorts of this, that, and the other. But when it's a man who does it, we get bombarded with, well, most, you know, most victims are women, you know, most victims are women, you know, men are less likely to come forward specifically because of that. Instead of getting help when we come forward with our issues, we get harmed by other victims. We get harmed and treated horribly and nasty by female victims, and some of these females aren't victims. But they get nasty with us because we speak up about how we've had to go through things. We get treated like all men are the enemy. All men must be like this. All men must be like that. My biggest problem after Natalie Bollinger and the situation in 2016 in Virginia is that her lies resulted in child molesters and rapists and actual predators getting away with their crimes, but me being treated like I was the one who committed those crimes. Now, Natalie never went and said anything like Sean was a rapist or Sean's a child molester. She didn't have to. Now, if you guys watch those videos that I posted in the last couple of days about Natalie Bollinger, you get to see how people automatically jump to that conclusion. Oh, well, he looks like a child molester. Oh, well, you're so pretty. You shouldn't have to deal with that because you're pretty. Like, holy hell. Is that really the world that we live in? It certainly is. Rosie, it says this message is held for review, but we'll show it anyway. Rosie typed, a lot of females even misuse this shit like blackmail a man by saying, if you don't do this, then I'll tell the police that you have molested me. And you're right about that. I know a lot of women who are strung out on drugs here in the United States. And the prettier they are, the more likely they are to have a bunch of guys giving them free drugs, or at least trying. Now, I can tell you from experience that I can say no. Lots of people can't. I've probably had people offer me thousands of drinks in the last 20 years, but I quit drinking in 2001. Most of the reason people offer me these drinks is they already know I'm going to say no. Or some of them are trying to slip me up and get me to do something that is against my best interest. It's obviously not a good idea for me to be drinking vodka. It's obviously not a good idea for me to even be drinking beer. I'm not sure how much you guys know about addiction. Most of the time, I don't want a drink. I mean, it's been a lot of years. After the situation with Natalie, I wanted to drink every day, but I didn't. After Natalie was killed, well, I really wanted to drink. I wanted to drink myself to death and have that be the end of it. And it's legal to do that, by the way. If you want to drink yourself to death, well, the United States will provide you with the poison. You have access to it. I got plenty of my friends who drank themselves to death. It's not impossible. It's not even close to impossible. Now, there was some other stuff that I was going to post up here. I can't remember what it was at the moment. Now, I do encourage you guys to watch this body cam footage with Zaid Atkinson. You guys, especially those of you who have been homeless, you guys are going to see how he's treated at the beginning before there's a man in a house recording it and speaking. You guys can see how the situation has escalated. You can also see how the police, once they realize they're being recorded, they've already called in the hobo hunters. They've already called in specifically the squad of officers that they call in when they're going to try to frame a homeless person. Now, if it hadn't been for BLM, we would have ended up in this situation with Zaid Atkinson, would have been similar to my situation, where they magically lose the body camera evidence, where they magically charge him with crimes that he didn't commit, and then absolutely refuse to allow him an honest court date. They continue to leave him locked up and stretch it out and stretch it out and stretch it out and stretch it out until the statute of limitations for turning in these officers is over. So BLM did something good for this man. The problem is that this man, Zaid Atkinson, at first, when he was speaking out about the situation, the first few days, he was speaking out specifically with the understanding that this is how homeless people are treated. Matter of fact, the way that he was speaking, he made it pretty clear that he did get off easy because he lived in a house. But he couldn't win the case that way because he wasn't targeted for being black. He was targeted because he was assumed to be homeless, just like Sammy Leon Lawrence IV. The difference between he and Sammy Leon Lawrence IV is that Sammy Leon Lawrence IV, although he lived in a house, he was assumed to be homeless. There was nobody in a house recording him and saying he lives here, he's allowed to be here. What it was is Sammy Leon Lawrence IV videotaping the way that the cops were treating the homeless. And Waylon Lolatai assaulted the shit out of him for it. Now, like I said in this video, the guy with the shotgun, the black man with the shotgun, is Waylon Lolatai. Now, in the Sammy Leon Lawrence situation, as well as the Michelle Rodriguez situation, these are all multiple situations that Darren O'Connor was aware of. Some of them he was made aware of specifically because of me. Sammy Leon Lawrence IV is a racist. He also expected special treatment for his disabilities, but he didn't want to put any effort into understanding mine. Now, Zaid Atkinson only had to deal with this once, and he didn't even get beat up by law enforcement. I did, repeatedly. Zaid Atkinson got paid $125,000 for what he went through, whereas I am paying out the ass, and so is the American public for what I have had to go through. I mean, not even counting the public pretenders' fees and the lawyers' fees and the county prosecutors' fees and all of the officers that were involved in traveling and driving and all sorts of other stuff. State of Nebraska taxpayers paid over $30,000 for me to be incarcerated for crimes that weren't even committed. Now, by calling me mentally ill and with the sheriff of this fair town, Scott DaCosta, claiming that I was schizophrenic everywhere that I went, he would call them up before I even got there and tell them that I was schizophrenic. And as a result, when I got there, I was automatically treated like I was schizophrenic. It was assumed that I was schizophrenic. And meanwhile, you cannot be diagnosed as schizophrenic by a law enforcement officer. They don't have the credentials. Meanwhile, when they're lying to the people that do have the credentials, well, between listening to you, who is called mentally ill, and listening to that person who has the badge, those mental health professionals are not likely to hear a word you have to say. They will listen to law enforcement. Now, we've had lots of situations. Here, hold on a second. Let me type in Sammy Leon Lawrence IV. Sorry, I farted. All right. Well, it looks like there's a bunch of stuff up from me before you get to Sammy Leon Lawrence IV. And it's also looking like everything other than that about Sammy Leon Lawrence IV has been taken off of YouTube. That's odd. Huh. Maybe it's a Y instead of an IE. Huh. Nope, not finding it. That is strange. All right. Well, that's quite all right. The guy was a dick. Now, I do want to point out that just because Sammy Leon Lawrence IV was a dick doesn't mean that he was not victimized. What he was doing when he was recording those officers was the right thing to do. He had a walking stick, not a weapon, but they automatically pretended that it was a weapon in order to justify harming him for recording them committing crimes against the homeless. And these are crimes that they commit against the homeless daily. I suppose we should go to Waylon Lolatai. copy link address. I highly recommend checking this one out. And then we'll go to Clearview Behavioral Health. This is where I was sent when I tried to turn in Officer Waylon Lolatai. One of their tactics is to call you mentally ill and ship you off out of jurisdiction when you try to turn in an officer. I was not heard when I tried to turn in Waylon Lolatai. As a result, he got to pull a shotgun on Samuel Leon Lawrence IV. I wasn't heard when I was assaulted by Waylon Lolatai. As a result, he got to assault Kelly Clark. I was not heard when I was assaulted by Officer Waylon Lolatai. As a result, he got to assault Michelle Rodriguez. I was not heard when I tried to tell on Officer Waylon Lolatai. As a result, he got to assault Samuel Leon Lawrence IV. These aren't the only victims. Michelle Rodriguez is fixing to get paid some good money. She might have already won her case. There's another family that was recently paid $3.2 or $3.4 million just for a false arrest. Meanwhile, I was repeatedly falsely arrested. Every time that I tried to turn in an officer, these officers know that if they charge me with a crime, I will not be heard. So they pressed false charges against me over and over again. They committed repeated felonies to allow my predators, like, well, for example, Alicia Michelle Bollinger and Rose M. Kelly, who is her mother, and Danica Garner, who is one of her ex-stepmothers, and Rochelle Shelley Campbell, who is another one of her ex-stepmothers. Law enforcement in multiple states took part in this. And of course, they get to deny my intelligence by calling me mentally ill, but then they get to hold me responsible for everything by saying that I'm intelligent and ignoring my disabilities. Meanwhile, my disabilities, when they want to use them against me, they pretend like I'm schizophrenic and bipolar and delusional. But then later on, when that is going to make it so that obviously I can't be actually held accountable because I wouldn't know what the fuck is going on, then they're like, oh, well, he's autistic. And then they go through and they pick apart assumptions and bias about autistic people, like we're supposed to be violent. Are you out of your fucking mind? Do you know the difference between somebody who is a low functioning autistic person and somebody with Asperger's? There's a big difference. I don't need to wear a football helmet. I can speak the English language. I can read. I can write. I don't need someone to wipe my butt for me. I'm able to open up a refrigerator without help. Now, some of you guys might wonder where that tangent went or why it showed up. That's because I know a lot of people who are autistic, who are severely autistic, that cannot speak, that cannot perform simple functions, that do crap themselves, and some of them do literally wear helmets. Is it okay to treat me like I'm one of those folks? We're obviously very different. Now, I did get to send a video between myself and one of my therapists today to an email string that I started. It's got two officers from Nebraska State Patrol Troop E. It's got my autism advocate. It's got several witnesses to the scenario and the situation. And there's also one reporter that I added to it. Although I don't necessarily feel as if she is the best person for the job. She is aware of a lot of the stuff that has gone on. And even though she screwed up, I think that she should have a chance to make it up. What else was I going to go through on here? There was quite a bit of stuff I was going to look up, but it's like 1:47 in the morning. There's a lot of stuff that I need to do during the day that I don't get to because I end up sleeping. I don't really go to sleep. I pass out of exhaustion. Um, I do encourage you guys to watch the video with Zaid Atkinson because it shows the assault. It shows Waylon Lolatai with his shotgun. Clearview Behavioral Health. I told on them. If I'd have been heard when I told on them and they would have done something about it then, back in January and February of 2018, we could have saved some lives, including Tibor Hatay or Tibor Hatay. Depends on which news agency was reporting about it. When you listen to that thing about Clearview, you're going to realize I've been telling the truth. If you don't look at it and you just want to assume that I'm wrong, well, that's not my fault. I'm letting you know here at the water hole you should probably fill up your canteen before spouting ignorance. In 90 miles, you're going to be spitting up sand. Obviously, that's a metaphor. Now, a lot of what I'm dealing with is systematic racism. A lot of these other victims feel that they have been ignored enough that the real victims should be ignored now. A lot of black folks are taught that no matter what, anything that happens to them is because of the color of their skin. And it's not, it's ease of victimization. That's why the police go after the homeless a lot more than they go after black folks. There's a reason that 81% of those incarcerated nationwide are homeless. The reason that there was only about 500,000 homeless people on the streets in 2019 is because there's 4 to 5 times that many in the prisons. Now let's see what the prison population is in America. Although 81% is 81% of all incarcerated, not just prison. As of 2016, 2.3 million people were incarcerated in the United States at a rate of 698 people per 100,000. Total U.S. incarceration peaked in 2008. Total correctional population, prison, jail, probation, parole, peaked in 2007. In 2008, the U.S. had around 24.7 of the world's 9.8 million prisoners. So it says, what is America's prison population in 2020? It says 2.12 million. All right. So we'll take 2.12 million. We'll go 81% of 2.12 million. That would be 1,717,200 people. That's almost 4 times the homeless population. 1,717,200 people are incarcerated who were homeless previously. That's a pretty significant number. My problem with Zaid Atkinson, it's not that he wasn't victimized, because he absolutely was. It's the fact that he's selling a narrative that he knows is incorrect, and so is BLM. Sammy Leon Lawrence IV and Zaid Atkinson are both aware of the homeless situation in Boulder, Colorado. Both of them spoke up about it. Also, both of them tried playing the whole "I'm black" card. They did this to me because I'm black. Zaid Atkinson is lighter skinned than the officer who pulled a shotgun on him. Sammy Leon Lawrence IV was assaulted by that very same officer. So was I. So was uh, Michelle Rodriguez. So was Kelly Clark. And many others. All by that same officer. Now, over here on the side in the live chat, there's a link to Officer Waylon Lolatai, so you guys can learn something about him. I really hope that you do. Now, there's some other stuff that I'm going to read. Let's see. This guy calling himself Mi'kmaq Warrior. He's been having an ongoing argument about this. He refuses to believe anything. See, he doesn't know any of these people. I do. I know many of these officers, not only by name, I've interacted with them. I've seen what they've done to other homeless people. I've had to experience what they've done to me. But because of my skin color, I'm ignored. Or because of my gender, I'm ignored. There are certain criteria in the United States that make you more or less worth listening to. A female is more worth listening to our society. And it's horrible. Mi'kmaq Warrior wrote, "How about you try to understand that people of color and homeless people are both minorities?" Well, I'm aware of that. However, the homeless are being ignored and they are highly victimized. To put this in perspective, if the homeless had the same population number as black people, 99% of those killed by police, over 99% of those killed by police and other law enforcement in the United States would be homeless people. Let's see. It says, "How about you try to understand that people of color and homeless people are both minorities and get treated like shit by police because of it?" Exactly. That was my point. My other point was that in situations like this, people are selling a false narrative because telling the truth would not win them a victory. And that's horrible. When you pretend that you are targeted because of the color of your skin, because if you tell the truth about it, nobody's actually going to care. Well, they do care because this guy was in a house. Just like they cared a lot more about Sammy Leon Lawrence IV than the police thought, because the police assumed that Sammy Leon Lawrence IV was homeless. But then again, Sammy Leon Lawrence IV was assaulted because there was nobody in a house saying he lives here. Whereas Zaid Atkinson, of course, he got special treatment because there was somebody in a house with a camera recording it saying he lives here. Let's see. Mi'kmaq Warrior also wrote, "And it's both wrong. You would think that would make sense to you." It does make sense to me. I stated that repeatedly. He wanted to continually type stuff that is entirely dismissive of the homeless prior to this. This is the first one where he actually makes an effort to pretend like homeless people could ever possibly be victims. He wrote, "You would think that would make sense to you." He also wrote, "I could tell you stories of me being racially profiled by police for 49 years. You absolutely could tell me stories of you being profiled by police for 49 years. But I could pretty much guarantee you that not every single time were you profiled for the color of your skin." Now, there's a good chance that in that 49 years, you were targeted multiple times because of the color of your skin. There is definitely that chance, especially 49 years ago. I mean, oh my God, the 80s, we were still dealing with some pretty hefty racism, and we still have to deal with it today. But today, people want to pretend like it doesn't exist. I'm not pretending that it doesn't exist. What I'm saying is that fighting just specifically for minorities, especially minorities who are going to pull twisted shit like this, is not helping out any of us. It's not just making it worse for all of the victims, it is making it worse, especially for the black community. If you're going to sell a false narrative in situations like this, people are less likely to believe you in situations where they actually were targeted for the color of their skin. I can tell you from living in Boulder, Colorado, that Sammy Leon Lawrence IV, well, he got the shit end of the stick. I can tell you from living in Boulder, Colorado, from knowing these people and these parties involved, knowing these officers by name in many cases, and the ones whose names I don't know, I have still had to interact with. I can tell you that the narrative here that's being sold is wrong. And I can tell you that based on number one, the way that Boulder police treat black people in general. Black people in Boulder, Colorado are treated extremely well. Now, if you're in Chicago and you're being targeted by police there because you're black, well, that's Chicago. I don't have any experience in Chicago. If you got pulled over because you had a fucked up tail light and well, lo and behold, you want to say that it's because you were black that you were pulled over. No, you were pulled over because you got a busted tail light. But I wasn't there. Now, let's say maybe that's not the case. Maybe you're absolutely right. Maybe you drove past him and he noticed that you were a black person and decided that he was just going to pretend like your tail light is out. Well, you can still show that your tail light's not busted. So you can win that in court pretty easily if you're allowed to show it. But as we all know, the courts are biased as well. But the bias that we hold against black folks in court and by the police is compounded 100-fold easily when you're homeless. If you want to fight for black rights, you need to fight for the homeless. If you want to fight for white rights, you need to fight for the homeless. If you want to fight for men's rights or women's rights, all of our rights are encompassed by the homeless because the homeless community is a very inclusive community. We don't have a choice. When you're homeless, you're homeless. That's the way it is. And people make all sorts of excuses why you deserve it. Well, that ain't right. We get to hear about how there's housing projects that are doing illegal things and preventing black people from getting into housing or kicking black people out of housing because of, well, any number of reasons. And those reasons, most of them are correct. They're actually going through that. But the other thing to look at is that I know a lot of white people who are going through the exact same thing. If white people are going through it, it's not because of the color of your skin. All right. If white people are going through the same exact thing, it's not happening to you because you're black. Now, in many of these cases, yes, black people are absolutely targeted. But what I'm saying is they're not targeted nearly as much. The victims that they're being the meanest to are the most victimized people in America. Not every black person out there is being cruel to the homeless. Not every black person out there is blaming everything on the homeless. Not every black person out there is out trying to raise hell against the homeless. And not every single officer who pulls you over is doing so exclusively because of the color of your skin. If the police assume that you're homeless, they are a lot more likely to do horrible things to you, especially in Boulder, Colorado. They're a lot more likely to harass you in this way if you're homeless. If you're black, they're going to give you preferential treatment, which they have been doing for the majority of my experience in Boulder. I know a lot of black people who got away with committing crimes in front of police officers because they were CU students. Some of them did have their IDs checked because they broke the law. They were let off with a warning when it was discovered that, yes, they were students at CU. Zaid Atkinson was not a student at CU. He does not have his hair all clean cut. He's not wearing a CU jersey. He's not wearing, fancy shoes. He's not trying to look like he plays for the basketball team or the football team. He's got dreads. He's got his hair put back. He's got, military boots on. He's got a hoodie on. He's got a grabber and a bucket. I mean, he looks like, well, a lot of homeless people I know. Now, the bucket and the grabber, those are not something that every homeless person carries around. But I know of at least, I was going to say two, but I know of at least three people in Boulder, Colorado who did that. There was James, there was John, and there was a lady who did it for a while. I don't know what happened to her. She was a much, much older lady. Um, but James, he's still there. He still does that. He still picks up the garbage, and he has gotten tickets from Boulder Police Department for picking up garbage. Oh, there's a dog coming to see me. Let's continue reading what McMaw Warrior wrote. He wrote, "But I'm a native. I was beat up so many times by racist cops that I wouldn't be able to list them all. Same thing with me. You notice that I'm not native and I'm not black? I've still had to go through it, Mr. McMaw Warrior." He wrote, "But I guess it doesn't matter to you unless I was homeless." No, it's not that it doesn't matter to me unless you're homeless. I still fight for Native American rights. Matter of fact, just for this fella right here, I'm going to send him a video. And I'm going to send it to you guys too. It's called The Missing Women of Hardin MT. Copy link address. This is for you guys, of course. Not that anybody's actually watching. He also wrote, "And I was for a couple of years, let's see, but I guess it doesn't matter to you unless I was homeless, and I was for a couple of years. But that doesn't explain the other 47 years of police abuse due to racial profiling. I feel like I'm trying to have a conversation with someone that will ignore the facts anyway." Well, that's how I feel. That is entirely how I feel. The focus needs to be on all the victims and what we can do to prevent that victimization in the future, not to make it more illegal when there's no way to enforce it. What's the point in making something illegal if you're not going to enforce it? And that's the problem we've had since 1954. 1954, we set the first laws making it illegal to commit particular crimes against people for the color of their skin. It's more illegal because of the color of their skin, but no way to enforce it. We didn't have body cameras back then. So then the 60s came around. Same thing. They passed the same set of laws again, but still no way to enforce it. Then the 70s showed up. They passed the same laws again, still no way to enforce it. Then the 1980s came around. Same thing. They passed the same set of laws again to make it more illegal. The department in America was dead set against it from the start. The reason for that is because most of the stuff that they did was frame people to make the American public feel better. Arapahoe County has a 90%, 97% conviction rate without it ever going to trial. That's because they'll trump up charges on you. You're not allowed access to your court information. Your public pretender doesn't show up, and they drag it out until ultimately you plead guilty to a crime that you didn't commit because you want to get out and you want to see your family. You're tired of being victimized by the jail guards. And yes, the jail guards just assume that you're guilty and they treat you completely like shit. You have rights, yes, but they don't observe them. And they don't have to observe them because just like the cops out on the street in the 1990s, the jails and the prisons are fighting hard to keep that out. Now, you want to pay attention to how much some of these folks are being paid. Millions of dollars, millions and millions of dollars. Now, obviously, many of these people are being paid this millions of dollars because of body cameras, because those body cameras are on and they can be used to hold police officers accountable. But in cases like mine, I was painted as a monster by the media and attacked by the public and the police, and it was somehow magically okay because of the color of my skin, something I deal with to this day. Now, Mr. McMaw also wrote, let's see, I feel like I'm trying to have a conversation with someone that will ignore the facts anyways. Maybe you can take a minute to listen and respect. Well, I have. I absolutely have. We should probably go back to the stuff previously in the comments so that you understand that. He wrote, have a real conversation with me. Pretend I'm white so my words matter. You know what? That last part right there, I love so much. I really do. So I sent him the link to the missing women of Hardin, Montana. I think I already posted it here, but I'm going to post it again just to make sure. Yep, I did. I can tell because the things are the same. When it comes to the missing and murdered, well, here's another one from Billings, Montana. That's within 100 miles of Hardin. So we're going to post this one. I don't know who it is that posted this up, but we'll put it up anyway. It might have some useful information. Someone named O.G. Lindaskin wrote, how come Joe Biden and all the other rich ass bastards have red in their left eye? I don't know even know what that's supposed to mean, but I'm going to show it anyway. OG Lindaskin, I don't know. I'm not even sure what you're asking, but other people might understand your terminology. One of the issues that I've had from the start is colloquial language, regional dialect, a lot of stuff that people don't understand. Out in the quote unquote real world, if you say somebody was leading you on, people automatically assume you're talking sexual. For somebody like me who grew up in the system, leading on means something completely different. When the staff leads you on to say that, oh, well, you're going to get to see the doctor on Wednesday, and the doctor doesn't show up on Wednesday, or the doctor does show up on Wednesday and they don't let you see him, and you say, hey, you led me on. Or when people make a deal with you and you fulfill your end of the deal, but they don't fulfill theirs, they led you on. They led you on to believe that if you did what they wanted, that they would help you. That's taking advantage. And when you are disabled, people take horrible advantage of you. When you are called mentally ill, people just assume schizophrenic. They think of people like Jack the Ripper, who raped prostitutes in London and then hacked them into pieces, literal pieces, and threw them around the room. Or they think of Jeffrey Dahmer, who drilled holes in children's heads and ate their genitalia. Or they think of the Branch Davidians at the Waco compound in Texas. Think of They don't think of a male who's dealing with depression over abuse. They don't imagine that you are being victimized. You couldn't possibly be victimized because of your skin color. You must be the predator because you're mentally ill. You must be this close to becoming Jeffrey Dahmer, or this close to becoming David Koresh, or this close to becoming the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski. And that is the reality of the situation. The homeless are the most victimized people in this country, the most victimized per capita. You will not find any other group in the country that is more victimized than the homeless, given their population size. There isn't one. When it comes to Native Americans, I fight for their rights for a reason. I see those as my rights. When it comes to black folks, I fight for their rights for a reason. I see those rights as my rights. And the reason that I see those rights as my rights is because I see what equal rights means. I know what equal means. It doesn't mean that black people get special treatment. It doesn't mean that women get special treatment. It doesn't mean that if something happens to two people and they're both victimized in the same way, that it's only wrong if the person is not white. It's magically okay if it's done to a white person. That white person must have deserved it. But you, as a black person, getting busted for the same thing, well, it must have been because of the color of your skin. If you committed robbery, you committed a fucking robbery. If your tail light is out, your tail light is out. You know how many times I have been pulled over for my tail light being out? Just in the last 4 years, at least 3 times. What do? I fix it. Did any of those officers make an incredibly big deal out of it? Yes. One of them, I was for certain that he was going to arrest me, assault me, and lock me up because of the way that he was yelling at me. Now, let's show you another situation. If I can remember the situation. Ah, yes, I do now. We'll go to my channel. We'll go to videos, and then we will search. Let's see. This one's called Wyoming Cops Who Do Their Jobs. These officers obviously profiled me as a homeless person or a drug dealer, and they harassed me as a result of it. But really, they did their jobs. They didn't commit any crimes except maybe lying to me. They didn't commit any crimes against me. Let's see, more harassment from Cheyenne PD. Nothing good in Cheyenne. Hardin, Montana. There's apparently another missing. Let's see, Bad Cops, Scotts Bluff. Was it removed from my channel? I don't think so. Maybe it's this one. I'll check it. Nope. Let's see. I'm sorry this is taking so long to find some of this stuff, but like I said, there's literally thousands of videos here. Here it is. It says Rawlins PD last year. No need to get hostile and bully people. This guy is an ass. Copy link address. And we'll post this here. Someone named Chris Johnson is posting. He wrote, "My neighbors are calling the cops on me again. I can't get out of akathisia." Akathisia, that's where your limbs are always in motion, usually due to the fact that psychotropic meds and meds that are given to people for depression, they're no good for you. They destroy your liver function. They prevent certain chemicals that your body produces or chemicals that are produced when you eat. You've got different parts of your body that are supposed to filter out a lot of those harmful chemicals, but these different medications prevent you from being able to filter out those harmful chemicals, and they build up. They also create chemical imbalance. Yes, these medications that are supposed to help with supposed chemical imbalances, most of the time they're not needed. It's not a chemical imbalance, it's situational. With akathisia, that's similar to having Tourette syndrome. When I do this, like when I'm really nervous, or I do this with my wrists, which I don't do as often because it is painful. I used to not be able to tell when I was doing that. I'd just keep my hands behind me or to my side so that people couldn't see it just in case. Now I can tell when I do it because when I do it, I go, ow, that hurt, you know? But Chris Johnson is obviously another profile of somebody who comes on here frequently. I don't know the other profile names that they've used, but there's easily 7 or 8 of them. And this guy is obviously kind of a troll, but also the things that he's talking about are valid. They do fit here. If I do this or I do this, somebody might assume that I'm having a reaction to methamphetamines, or that means that I'm schizophrenic or something of that nature. But in reality, I have Tourette's syndrome, and it is documented. I probably have akathisia myself. However, I'm not going to self diagnose that. When I was a kid, I had a list of diagnoses as long as my arm. Most of those diagnoses I was diagnosed with as a result of side effects of medications that I was taking for other things. The medications that are given to you for having Tourette syndrome will kill you, not will maybe kill you, not will potentially kill you. No, you. One of the meds that I was taking, I had to get a liver function test literally every 2 weeks. That means every 2 weeks they were drawing my blood and making sure that my liver was doing what it was supposed to. Now, they did that with several medications, but these are for something that doesn't hurt anyone. Me doing this, does that hurt you? Did that break your arm? No, it didn't. How about when I do that thing with my wrists? Does that hurt you? Does that damage your liver when I do that? No, it doesn't. But you're going to damage my liver so that I can fit in. Well, if you tried harder to fit in, are you on fucking drugs? You got no idea how much effort it takes to fit in with the society that doesn't like you when you're different. You have no idea how much time and how much effort it takes for me to normalize, for me to have to control my Tourette syndrome at all points in time so that I'm not victimized as if I'm some sort of a junkie trying to fuck your kids. Now, is Chris Johnson a bad person? I don't know. I don't know Chris Johnson. Similar to this Mick Mawfeller. I don't know where he's at. I don't know what his experiences are. But he was speaking on something that I know a lot about. Now, obviously, I didn't read all of the ignorant stuff that he posted before that. I just posted up the last part, or I guess I didn't post it, I just read it. But the thing is, a lot of this happens. A lot of it. A whole lot of it. It's assumed that because you're intelligent, that you should be able to magic your way out of all of these situations. Just because you're intelligent doesn't mean that you can magic your way out of anything. It's kind of like I got an IQ of 172. A lot of people think that that must automatically come with a degree in nuclear science. It doesn't. It doesn't. I don't automatically get a doctorate for having a high IQ. You know what it takes to get a doctorate? Well, there are some people that have doctorates that they're not actually doctors. One of them is a woman with autism by the name of Temple Grandin. She has a doctorate. Is she a medical doctor? No, she's not. She's just, well, pretty high up there in her field. Now, there's a lot more stuff in these comments that I probably should be reading to you. There's someone calling themselves Moldy Sponge. One of them from someone called Arturo. Um, these people have a lot of things to say. When they don't agree with me, automatically I must be full of shit. Um, a lot of people want to keep pounding the "you need to just let it go" thing. This is something that male victims are told, but female victims most generally are not. And although female victims may be told these things by some people, more often than not, they're getting help. whereas men are just laid by the wayside. If you were a victim of sexual assault and you're a male, nobody fucking cares. Nobody's going to help you unless your family is there and they actually care. In many cases, the victims of that sexual assault are specifically assaulted because their parents aren't there. They're not a part of their lives. Much like the situation with Natalie Bollinger and myself, our parents are fucking druggies and alcoholics. We aren't going to get any help from them. Natalie's family didn't do shit until she was dead. Before that, they were trying to get her put in prison. Of course, she was a pretty girl, so she got away with all of it. Um, I suppose I should probably read this from Moldy Sponge. Moldy Sponge wrote, well, actually, I'll start a new video for this. It's that important. And this video is getting kind of long.